Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Durst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I've worked with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the U.S. What sets them apart? A lot. But there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It's also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. The people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The inside track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of uncertainty, of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Pam Cleaver, what a great opportunity to have you on our episode today. We're so excited for you to be a part of this show. Pam, you're someone that I've known for a number of years. I've really respected you in terms of your business skills, communication skills, leadership skills, and you didn't get to where you're at without having the courage and intelligence and emotional intelligence that you possess so that you have become a partner in a very significant public accounting firm. Pam, why don't you, for our listeners who might not know you as well as I do, why don't you kind of walk me through your career? You don't have to start with, I was born in a log cabin. Kind of start me from your childhood and bring us up to today and what you've been doing.
Okay. We'll make it as brief as possible, but I'm a native Washingtonian. When I got out of college, there weren't a lot of jobs, so I started in a very bad economy in the 80s and went to work at a sand and gravel company as an internal accountant. I dispatched concrete mixers and gravel trucks and all that. Started with paper documents and one of those old machines, that you had to run a tape through to balance. So started with that and then decided to go into public accounting and have been in public accounting ever since. So started at a couple smaller firms, and then ended up at Moss Adams and have been there for 22 years in public accounting.
For some of our listeners, that machine that has a tape in it, they may have to Google that just a bit to see what that is. So describe, Pam, what a partner in a public accounting firm, what does that mean? What are the roles, responsibilities? What does it all entail?
So as a partner in a public accounting firm, and I specialize in auditing, financial services, but I also do a lot of essential business advising to our clients. And really what it means is I'm out a lot with clients, talking to them about how to present financial statements. I'm talking to audit committees, and then talking to them about what things they can do with their internal controls so that they can run their operations a little bit better, maybe more efficiently. And then we manage the people that work for us. And so we're out on different types of engagements. And not only just in the financial statement world, but that could be some of my other partners deal in the tax world or in the consulting world, and just a whole host of financial services.
So, Pam, we are sitting here in the beginning of April when the entire COVID-19 is all around us. You can't pick up a paper, you can't open up a news feed, you can't turn the TV on without seeing something about it. How does that impact your work? And then the follow-up question for that is that how does transition management get impacted by this all?
We are dealing with a ton of information coming at us right now, as I think most people are. And it's amazing. And it seems to change every day. And for people not in public accounting, we have to change every day. It's just one of those things that becomes part of culturally what we do, because the rules don't ever seem to stay stagnant. And even if the rules are stagnant, our clients have different interpretations of them. And none of our clients look the same. And so when you look at, for instance, what's happened in the last couple days, in particular since March 27th, a lot of guidance has been coming out to clients, whether it's taking out loans or different credits they can take. And the guidance has changed from day to day. And so you get an email today, you talk to your clients, the next day you get something else. And so there has been a ton of just informational things. I deal a lot in a tax exempt space where they may not be getting, maybe different types of credits, but when it has to do with payroll taxes, of course, that applies to anybody who has employees. So really a state of how can we best serve our clients? What information can we get out to them in a really when we're all being a little bit overwhelmed or maybe a lot overwhelmed with the amount of information, and what's the right information? So you're trying to steer people and not overload them, because I don't know about everyone else out there, but I feel overloaded with information right now.
For sure. Pam, someone's going to say, well, wait a second, Bob, I thought that this podcast was all about transition management. How can
Right.
someone that is been 22 years with the same employer, how can you have a feel in terms of transition management?
I think part of it is just when you look at transition in any sort of capacity, it's you have to transition in any job or any role, any industry as you go through the years. And in my case, I have changed firms over the years. So, and every firm does something different. You're like, oh, really? All accounting isn't the same, and it's true. While the basics are the same, you still have to do things differently. Different firms do things differently, and also our clients do things differently. And so you might get something that applies to one client, but then it's different at another client. And so you really have to change from just even how you present things from client to client, and then factor into that the people aspect of things. And I don't know about you, Bob, and what you do, but boy, we have, everyone hears things different. Every person, whether it's an employee or a client, might need something presented to them in a different way. So we're transitioning, depending on how you define it. It feels like we're in a state of transition continually.
Yeah. So, Pam, you said that you deal with a lot of tax exempt clients that you have, and in that space, a number of them right now are being stressed. It's a tough world that they're in. And so one of them, let's just say, comes to you and says, Pam, we lost our funding or any number of things that could have happened, and I need to go find something else. Talk me through what you coach that kind of person.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. Part of it is when if that situation arose, it's really making sure that people are looking at the whole picture, right? And sometimes it's just talking somebody off the ledge in the current environment. In our funding, some of the funding could, if it's coming from contribution sources. So let's say that in that case, the person says, the sky is falling and all of our donors are going to stop giving, right? Well, they may or they may not, but it's really saying, okay, let's sit down and talk about what you should be doing, because in these times, not all your funding is going to go away. There might be some of it that goes away, but some of it may just be on pause for right now. And so it may just be taking a step back and making sure that that's what's really going to happen. Because right now there's a lot of emotion And I get it. And so it's kind of like, okay, just let's see what this is like. Let's make sure if it is contributions, you're talking to your largest contributors and letting them know what the situation is, right? Not just assuming it's all going to go away. If it's more of a federal funding, it's making sure that if you're in a funding situation, what that funding stream is going to be like going forward. Some agencies are still being funded. If it's member revenue, member revenue is a tough one. And if it's member revenue, what some people are doing is saying, hey, if you're a 501c3, I know that we're not providing services right now, but could your member revenue, could it be a contribution this month? If people have the wherewithal to switch, some will. If they don't, it depending on their situation. But what we don't want to do is assume, and maybe you want to change the messaging when you're talking to people, with your donor base, if that's the situation. So it's really, I've had a lot of conversations with clients just to make sure, that they can have a conversation and that we can talk it through, because right now there is a lot of pressure out there and there's a lot of information, and sometimes frankly they just want to have a conversation and bounce something off somebody.
So let's assume in this example, let's assume the worst, and it really is that the person and the organization they're a part of, or at least their part of it, doesn't have a future and that they need to go find something else. How can you help them? How can people learn from you in terms of if someone comes to them with that question?
Well, and right now with the way the unemployment is working, there have been a lot of people that are saying, hey, I can get unemployment for right now, right? And that can act as a stopgap. And so that's why when you see in the paper right now and it says, well, the number of people applying for unemployment is unprecedented. And I don't want to throw out any of the buzzwords going on right now. But part of the reason why it is because people can get on that right now and it'll be their survival, until they could hopefully find something, or maybe in the next, after the period of when that expires, perhaps we're in a better situation where something else is available. So right now, a lot of people are falling back on that, the unemployment aspects of it. So that's probably what I would tell them.
What should they be doing? How should they maximize that time?
So while we're in this phase, it's always good to say, what can I learn? It's kind of when the market in 2008, 2009, when we had the recession, what skills can you bring to people? And you really want to look and say, while I'm doing this, what can I improve on? My Excel skills, what kind of computer skills do I have? My communication skills. Because what people out there are looking for is what value can you bring to an organization? If you can, and I'm not sure about volunteering right now or people's what they want to do in this time, but there may be some things. If you want to build your resume, and if you put your shoes yourself in the shoes of someone who's hiring, what would they want to see? And it would really be enhancing the skills or getting a new skill that is valuable to the person that you would want to work for. And there's lots of stuff out there. I mean, it's amazing when you get out on YouTube or, you go to search something, the resources, it's crazy.
Yeah. Your coaching that you give them in terms of development and how to go about the search process. So you've talked about the development. Now let's talk just a bit in terms of that search process. What have you suggested to people? How should they go about that?
But I would look and say, okay, what do I want to do and what skill do I need? And because I'm a practical accountant, is there a need for that skill? And so if you wanted to stay in an area, I would look out and say, what are people looking for, right? You might want to check on some of the places that post jobs or skills and go out there and look, and then see where you could find that training. And if money is an issue, look and see if you could get something for a reasonable price or for something that you can afford. And if the money isn't such an issue, I would look at what some of the higher education or institutions, because they are going to be looking for people, right, to come. And we've got some great institutions in the Yakima Valley. And there may be some of those institutions that you want to look at and say, what skill do they have that I could get from them?
So, Pam, you've hired hundreds of people in your career. Let's talk about resumes that work and resumes that don't work. Give our listeners some clues in terms of effective resumes.
I like resumes that don't use lingo and really are just heartfelt. And when I say heartfelt, but also they are factual. Because what you really want to do is tell the employer, hey, I have this skill. And there are a lot of people who want to sell the skill, but just be very factual. This is my skill, and state it in a short, succinct way, and then show that. So your letter's an overview, and then your resume yourself is, this is where I worked and what I did. And then if you have good contact people that are going to be your references, it gives the employer a chance to call them and ask if they would rehire you. And I think most people are pretty honest about that. If you did a good job and they'd rehire you, that is a good testimony to what you did there. Mm-hmm. I always like to see people who worked in farm labor, because that means they can work hard, but that's just my personal bias.
So let's say now you're past the resume stage and you're in the stack that your company is going to follow up with the person. And now someone, maybe you, will do a telephone interview with them. Talk through techniques that you believe are most effective by a person who's in transition to make that telephone interview go as well as possible.
It's important for them to be prepared to ask questions about what their role is going to be. A lot of times you get in situations where that person, they just keep talking because they're trying to sell themselves. And while you understand that, it's that inquisitiveness, that ability to learn. It's always good to make sure you're asking questions. In the same frame, you want to make sure you have researched, that the person being interviewed has researched the company. If they're coming to work for us, I want to make sure they've researched Moss Adams and that they have good questions. That's the second, questions to ask of us. I think that's really important, especially in transition, because when you hire someone, especially somebody with a lot of experience, you want to make sure that the fit is right and that they understand, because they do have the experience. When you're younger, sometimes you don't always know what experience you want.
Anything different when you move to the in-person interview? Do you prepare differently? Are there different things that I should be thinking about when I do the in-person interview?
So I'm not your standard interviewer. I always like to ask the unexpected questions, because then people can't prepare for them. So I like to see how people are going to react when I ask them things that aren't on the list. So I would tell people, come prepared, but also be yourself. Because in my mind, it has to be a win-win. You never want to hire somebody that it needs to fit, right? And you want them to be part of your organization if they want to be part of the organization. And I don't mean that in a kitschy way. I just mean it in a way that it works better, right? If you can find that fit. So people shouldn't be afraid to ask questions about what's the culture of the office. In some ways, I think people ask that in a broad sense. And if there's something really particular they want, they need to ask that particular question. And they may not ask a partner, maybe they ask somebody at, whether it's when they talk to HR or whoever they're talking to in that process, but make sure that they have vetted those questions out. The in-person is really, in-person is hard, right? Because neither side really knows until you get in there. But I do think it's an important part of the interview process, just to get more of a feel and have that face-to-face. In our new world, it might just be on Skype all the time.
We hope we get back to the in-person. Pam, what do you mean by when you say the in-person is hard? What do you mean by that?
It's hard sometimes because when you get in a situation like that, you're trying to read body language, and sometimes, and on both sides are, and you're trying to be relaxed, and sometimes when it's hard for the person being interviewed just to relax, which is okay in some respects, but you want to know what the person's going to be like when they come to work for you, just like they want to know what you're going to be like when they come to work. And so that's what I mean, that sometimes you think that, oh gosh, that went really well. And sometimes it does. Sometimes you think, well, maybe it didn't go as well as I thought it did. There's no crystal ball on interviewing, or I haven't found it yet.
Let's say that you have one of your staff come into you, been working with you for the last several years in accounting, and they come to you and say, Pam, I'm not happy. I'm not getting the kind of job satisfaction I'm looking for. And I'm thinking that I want to leave and go be a marketing person or an HR person or, whatever, some different path. How do you coach that person?
Well, and I've had that happen over the years. So, if honestly, you may not know this, Bob, but there is a very high turnover in public accounting in general in the first couple of years. And there always has been. And so over the years, you have people come to you and you think, you know what? I think you'd be great in HR. I think that's awesome. You should go do that. And then you help them, hey, I've got this contact. Why don't you go talk to him? And so it really depends on the person. And then there are other people where they might just be going through a transition in their life. Perhaps they've just had a change in their life and you think, okay, well, let's talk through the whys of why you want to do this. And they may come to the same conclusion, but in that case, some have stayed and some have left. So it really it's dependent on the person. So there's no one answer, but I have done all different kinds of things in those situations. Some that you help find something else, and some that we've helped stayed, and some that you've tried to help stay and leave anyway.
Pam, over the years, has transition management or helping someone in transition or being the person who is in transition, has that over the years changed?
Yes, I think when I first started, if someone said, I'm leaving, you would have said, oh, okay, bye, right? I think we're a much more flexible in how we do things now. I mean, I think as a culture, and I know in public accounting, definitely we have changed a lot over the last 30 years. So I think we talk about it a lot more, and we talk about what our role is. And our role is to hire and train good people. A lot of them will go on and do other things, and we want them to do that and do it well, because that is a reflection of what we've done right. So I don't know that it was like that 30 plus years ago, to be honest, in our industry.
Pam, if I'm over 50, or I'm a minority, or I'm too short or too tall, or, too whatever, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Is transition management different for any of those?
Oh, that's a good question. I do know that I just think about different transitions that we all have. I'll give you a good, for instance, when you transition in life and you get a divorce, personally, when you're in your late 40s, it felt like transition was harder than when it happened to my friends in their 20s, right? So just using my personal transition, I would say that it can be more difficult, but I can't speak to it in those people's shoes. From my own perspective, it felt differently, maybe just because you were at a different point in your life.
Yeah, I think that perspective and where you're at on that life curve is going to have an impact for sure. Part of your job that you do is understanding businesses, understanding organizations. And part of the job of someone that is in transition needs to be, as they're going to go interview with companies, different businesses, different industries, that they have to be more knowledgeable about that. You said that you like that when someone comes in and knows something about Moss Adams. Give us some tips, techniques that people should use as they're going to be talking with these businesses and industries to help them understand that business or industry better.
Okay. Well, so if we use not-for-profits as an example, I mean, there are so many websites out there. You can go out there and look at the Council on Foundations. If you're interested in higher ed, you can look at the National Association of College and University Business Officers. There's the Washington State Not-for-Profits. There is a ton of information out there available for you to learn about industry things. You don't have to know everything, but it would be good to know what's going on in the industry at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You can also, as an accountant, we can get on the AICPA, the Association for Certified Public Accountants, and get on there and look, and tons of information out there. And it's also public sites, and look at that. And for Moss Adams, if you were interested in Moss Adams, you can get out on the website and look at that. There is so much information that you can get out and look at anymore that you Google something. Again, it's just in my transition over the years, when we used to have to go and look in a book or to try and find something. And now you can be like, oh, hey, I'm just going to look this up, and boom, sometimes too much information.
Right.
But you can get out there and get a general sense and kind of sift through to have a good, good broad overview of an industry.
Yeah.
In particular.
Pam, a friend of yours wants to sit down with you, and she is in transition and has had a few interviews and no job offers, no real nibbles yet even. How do you take those setbacks and how do you learn from those? What should you do?
I think any good salesperson would tell you that sometimes it's just timing, and some of the most successful people are the ones that look at what they've done and ask the people. And I would actually have the people go back and ask the person in particular, hey, can you help me? Why didn't you hire me? I would tell people to follow up, because following up, if they'll give you an answer, right, will help you tremendously. Because there are some very people, if you define people successfully who've risen up through all kinds of different things, is they didn't take no the first time, right? And so learn from those. And if you can get feedback, definitely ask for feedback. I've actually had people come back to me and ask, and I've told them to say, well, you might want to try this, and definitely go do this in your resume. And next time I wouldn't do this with your letter. So get as much feedback as they can, because that's the only way to improve and go forward. Sometimes it's just bad luck or bad timing, or they might be asking for too much money, or they might not be talking to the right people. So those are those things to have people go through and look at.
Good coaching. Let's say that one of your friends is an introvert and you have told them of the importance of networking, almost cold calling sometimes. And you in public accounting have to be an effective networker. You've built up that muscle, you've built up those skills. How do you help that introverted person build their networking muscle?
I tell them, because we coach folks that grow, that are in our organization to do that. And you really have to find something that you believe in. And I hate to use this term passionate because it's overused, but find something that you believe in, and that, because if you do that, it's easier to do, right? And you have to frame it in a way that you feel comfortable doing it. Sometimes walking into a room and there's going to be a bunch of people there, you think, okay, well, what am I going to do? And one of the best things you can do is you can walk up to somebody, and the extroverts in the room like talking about themselves. So if you can find a topic, what do you do for your business? What do you do in your business? People like to talk about their businesses or what they're doing. And so then the other person can do the talking, and the introvert doesn't have to say too much, except for maybe just spur the conversation and take the spotlight away from them. And that can kind of help them, but they do have to keep trying if they want to make those contacts. And I know it's not easy, but that's kind of the way we have tried to help people. And the other thing is to try and have them go with someone who is more comfortable and team up with someone, and that can be helpful.
So Pam, sometimes the transition process is an enjoyable experience and you find out about yourself and other things. Sometimes it is a dark and terrifying experience. Any books or things that can help motivate, can help teach, can help a person who is going through transition to make it a more positive experience for them?
Well, I really think you have to have a positive mental attitude. And there's an old book by Norman Vincent Peale that my dad had it taped to our refrigerator growing up. And so PMA is positive mental attitude. And I truly believe that is a key in any sort of transition. And I know it can be hard, but if you have that positive mental attitude, it gets you a long way in this life. And there's all the phrases, turn lemons into lemonade and all that stuff. But There is something to be said for that, because if you can do that, it really helps you muscle through, and you might go through some of those things. But I think that's really been helpful to me over the years, because when you transition to a new job, number one, it's going to be hard, right? There's going to be changes. But if you look at change as a new way to be innovative and be positive about it, I do think that's helpful. So that would be my one thing to look at.
Pam, if the listeners here don't remember anything else about this episode, but these last three things that you want them to keep in mind about transition management, what would those three things be?
Oh, I think the three things would be open-minded, listen, and be positive. Be positive, because transition can be the best thing that ever happened to you.
Well, listeners, I'm sure that you, like I, just got a lot of value from Pam and her thoughts. I love those three last items. Being open-minded, you never know, what's around the corner, that you might find that ideal position for yourself. Listening and learning all the way on that process, and being positive is going to help you, because being negative is contagious. And if you're negative, trust me, the people that you need most to help you in that transition, it's going to be more difficult for them. Pam, thank you so much for your time, for your insights, for your learnings. And we appreciate your being a part of our learning journey about transition management. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob.
I hope you got as much out of that program as I did. So exciting and information packed. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to my podcast. I hope it was worthwhile for you to bring me along with you as you drove to work, or you worked out, or you had some downtime, that you could listen to People in Transition. I'd love to hear from you on your thoughts for the program. Please send me a note, and we can ensure that we address any of the issues that you might have in future episodes. I hope that you share this podcast with your friends, people at the supermarket, people at the gym, because it's all about a conversation on people in transition. I hope you got some useful tips and ideas about what to do in transition. Again, this is Bob Gerst. You can find me on LinkedIn page. Feel free to send me a note there. And remember, we are all in transition. It just might not be today, but at some point in time, change happens. And the more you are prepared for it, the better you'll be. Thanks again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you next time on our next issue.